And yeah, sir, Professor Natarajan served as the director of Indian Institute of Technology, Madras from 1995 to 2001. And he was then the chairman of the All India Council for Technical Education, the apex body for technical education, from 2001 to 2004. And I had the opportunity of working under him during 2001 to 2004. And since those days, I know sir as a very dynamic and a very dedicated person towards the cause of technical education. He was the vice president of Indian National Academy of Engineering during 2002 to 6 and the chairman of Research Council of the Central Fuel Research Institute, Dhanbad during 1995 to 2005. He was a member of the India-China Eminent Persons Group during 2002 to 2004. He was still recently the chairman of Board for IT Education Standards of Karnataka and the co-chairman of the Engineering Education Forum of the Indian National Academy of Engineering. He is a fellow of the Indian National Academy of Engineering, Indian Society for Technical Education, National Academy of Social Sciences, Institution of Engineers India, Indian Institution of Plant Engineers, National Foundation of Indian Engineers, Indian Institution of Materials Management, and Madras Science Foundation. He has been conferred honorary doctorate degrees by the University of South Australia, Jawaharlal Nehru Technical University, Andhra Pradesh, Kanpur University, UP, Nagarjuna University, Andhra Pradesh, and Purvanchal University, UP, and NIT Agartala. He has been a member of editorial boards of Fuel London, Fuel Science and Technology, ASEE Journal of Engineering Education, International Journal of Engineering Education, Transformations in Engineering Education, Indian Journal of Technical Education, and Staff and Educational Development International Editor of the Journal of the Steam and Fuel Users Association of India and the Journal of Plant Engineering. So sir has a very impressive resume, and sir has been recently delivering a lot of webinars on the national education policy also. And we are very thankful, sir, for accepting this offer of educating the faculty members of this webinar, including the faculty members and organizers of this workshop from Guru Tegh Bahadur Institute of Technology. On behalf of the management, the faculty, staff of the Guru Tegh Bahadur Institute of Technology, I accord you a very hearty welcome for this webinar. And all the participants are very patiently holding on to listen to you, and we are looking forward to your talk now. So over to you, sir. The stage is all yours now.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be present here today to give a brief outline of the national education policy. The document also looks at the past, because we have to learn from the past and then go on towards the future. I have some critical comments to make. I will make them towards the end, and also if there is a Q&A session, which I'm sure you will have. So maybe I'll bring out some of those ideas. Now I'll share my screen. Can you see the screen?
No, sir.
No, not yet, sir.
There's always this problem.
Sir, if you could click the PPT, PowerPoint, it will be okay. The screen is visible, but PowerPoint is not visible, sir.
I have sent you the PowerPoints. Do you want to take control?
It's okay, sir, if you can continue. Otherwise, then we will hand over the control of those PPTs. If you are not able to, if you are not able to see your PPTs, then we can. I think we can.
Sir, if you could click on, sir, if you could click the PowerPoint. Sir, you press Windows and D.
Yeah.
Yes, it is coming.
Now
sir,
we can see. We can see, sir. We can see, sir.
Okay. Right. Let me start. Basically, I'm going to give you only the major highlights of NEP, which is a long document. It looks at primary education, secondary education, higher education, and so on. Obviously, we are going to focus on higher education. It was actually the draft was presented to the government in 2019. It was approved in 2020. And subsequently, a lot of action has been generated. Now, let us take a look at this. Is an official document. It was presented to the government when it was called the Ministry of Human Resource Development. One of the recommendations was that it should be transformed into the Ministry of Education, and this has already happened. So this is the original document. It has a vision. Every policy document has a vision. This policy 2019, because the draft was presented at that time, it looks at an India-centered education system. It does not deal with the global system, any country whatsoever. It is referring to our aspirations, our actions, our implementation strategies, and so on. It is expected to contribute directly to transforming our nation. Something was in the past, but in the future, it is going to be different. That is the hope of this policy, sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society. If you remember, about 10 years ago, when the UPA government was in power, we used to talk about the knowledge superpower. But at the moment, remember that it is called a knowledge society. By providing high quality education, that is the quality of what we teach the children, to all, it covers all sections of society. So it is both quantitatively and qualitatively, this is the vision. Now we got our independence in 1947, and since then, many policy directions have been given, and they have resulted in major transformations, transformational reforms in the education sector. We will quickly go through the different reforms. It started with the University Education Commission in 1948-49, then the Secondary Education Commission, then the Education Commission under Dr. D.S. Kothari. This made a large number of recommendations. Many of them have been implemented, leading to improvements in our education system. This is a landmark achievement. Then in 1968, the National Policy on Education was announced, followed by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976. Till 1976, from 1947, education was in the state list. Then in 1976, it came into the concurrent list. What it means is that both the state government as well as the central government have an equal role in transforming the educational scenario. Then in 1986, a major policy initiative was undertaken. This was the National Policy on Education. After a great deal of consultation, in some of them, maybe some of your senior faculty members might have been involved. In 1992, it was slightly modified, including a program of action. Then in 2016, very recently, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the TSR Subramanyan committee, TSR Subramanyan was the cabinet secretary, the highest secretary position in the government. And under his leadership, a report was made in 2016, just 5 years ago. Then in 2019, Dr. K. Kasturirangan committee was constituted, and they submitted the report to the cabinet committee, then the parliament, and so on. Now it is now being implemented. So these are the different steps which have been undertaken to evolve the national education policy. I will have a few critical comments to make about what has been done and what has not been done. For example, if in 2016, a government-appointed committee submitted a report, why hasn't the 2019 committee taken cognizance of the recommendations of the Subramanyan committee? I'll show you about 10 recommendations, and these have not been taken into consideration. That means we have not made use of the wisdom of the past. There was a tremendous involvement of the different stakeholders, starting with online publication, then 2.5 lakhs gram panchayats, etc. They were all consulted. And the draft summary was published in 22 languages, including an audio book. Why 22 languages? Our country has, if you know, if you do not know, 22 official languages. We are a highly complex country, particularly in the nature of education. Then there was a dialogue with MPs from selected states and a special meeting of CABE, Central Advisory Board on Education, which is the apex committee governing the policy making in the government. Then the Parliamentary Standing Committee on HRD, it received the report in 2019. And subsequently, a lot of action has been initiated. What are the, I've summarized the major reforms in higher education which have been proposed by the policy. The enrollment ratio, gross enrollment ratio, at the moment it is half of what they expect to have. By 2035, usually they talk about a time frame of 15 years to 20 years. So by 2035, they would like to have a 50% gross enrollment ratio. This means not only higher education, but also other sectors of education. You must remember that. And then there's the flexibility of subjects through, these words are used repeatedly in the policy document, holistic and multidisciplinary education. It has a lot of, it has caused a lot of confusion because many people have different concepts of what holistic and multidisciplinary education is concerned. Again, I have some critical comments to make. Multiple entry and exit, whether it is suitable for India or not, it's not known. UG program, 3 or 4 years. A 4-year program, including some research experience. PG program, 1 or 2 years as it exists now. And an integrated 5-year bachelor's or master's program, essentially master's program, including 4 years of the erstwhile bachelor's program. And the 2-year PG program has been compressed into 1 year. So it becomes a 5-year. Already many institutions have this. And another important recommendation, MPhil, which now exists as a bridge between undergraduate education and PhD in arts and sciences, that the MPhil is to be discontinued. Credit transfer and academic bank of credits, good recommendations. And the HEIs, you will see a lot of abbreviations. You have to get used to them. We were used to a number of abbreviations earlier, but now we have a new set of abbreviations. UGC, for example, AICTE, for example. HEIs are higher education institutions. They will be classified into 3 types: research intensive, teaching intensive, and autonomous degree granting colleges. At the moment, colleges cannot grant degrees. If you want to grant a degree, you have to be a university. But now the new concept of autonomous degree granting colleges has been initiated. And near every district, they propose to have a MERU, M-E-R-U, Model Multidisciplinary Education and Research University. So these are the major recommendations. Graded autonomy. You realize that autonomy means academic autonomy, administrative autonomy, and financial autonomy. Graded autonomy, which has already been proposed by UGC, depending upon your performance, you're allowed to have autonomy in specific areas. And phasing out the affiliation system in 15 years. You are an affiliated college, affiliated to the Indra Prasad University, I believe. So the affiliation system is to be phased out in 15 years. At every higher education conference or seminar, we have been saying over the past 50 years that the affiliated system is the bane of our higher education system, essentially because what is the opposite of affiliation system? It is the autonomy in the system. Autonomy basically means freedom. Academic autonomy, administrative autonomy, and financial autonomy. Although this has been bandied about over the past 50 years, at the moment it is only 15% of our colleges, affiliated colleges, who have been granted autonomy. 85% of the colleges in India at the moment belong to the affiliating system. Obviously, if you do not have academic, administrative, and financial autonomy, you're not free to bring about improvements. That is the implication of autonomy. And even now, I do not know whether autonomy will be a reality in the near future. You see, autonomy has to be given and it has to be taken. I was a member of a committee which visited many colleges in the South and the affiliated colleges were asked whether they would become autonomous. Neither the receiver of the autonomy, namely the college, nor the giver of the autonomy. Who gives autonomy? UGC and the university system. Neither of them is willing to give autonomy in the complete sense. The TechBIT program, the Technical Education Quality Improvement Program, which has been in existence for about 20, 25 years now, the fourth phase will be coming into being soon. It has made a number of improvements to our educational system, technical education system. One of the preconditions was, the World Bank and the central government together, it was a partnership. One of the preconditions was these TechBIT colleges, institutions should be given autonomy. Even towards the end of the TechBIT program, I believe it is only about 20% of the colleges which have been given autonomy. So it is not succeeded. Let me point out here that while the NEP proposes a number of changes and the government is in a hurry to implement many of them, Karnataka government, for example, has promised that within if the changes have to take place in 20 years, they say they will bring about the changes in 10 years. There is a very active implementation scheme here. But whether they will succeed in fulfilling all the promises, it is yet to be seen. For example, the 6% of GDP towards education, it has been said time and time again, but at the moment it is only half or even less than half. GER, which is supposed to be 50% in another 15 years, it is at the moment only about 20% or even less. Therefore, the promises can be made, but to bring them to reality is a very big task indeed. There will be a national mission on mentoring. It's an excellent idea. Independent board of governors. That is the government not coming in the way of appointing directors of these institutions, of doing many other things, including finances. There's only one bill which has been passed, that is the IIM bill, which in 2017, it made the IIMs independent. They are allowed to grant degrees. They were only granting PGDMs earlier. And they have independent board of governors, which can appoint a director, which is a revolutionary change in our system. And a single regulator for higher education, excluding legal and medical because of some legal issues. One single regulator, we'll see the details of that. Online self-disclosure of and transparent system for approvals in place of inspections. I do not know how this can happen without the institutions being visited by peer teams. That is an inspection. Inspection looks like a bad word, but peer team visit is not such a bad word. Common norms for public and private already exist, and public investment in education sector to reach 6% of GDP at the earliest. I don't know when the earliest will be. At the moment, it is only about 2%. I'll look at the other challenges also. Now, what are the major reforms which have been made? Good ones. National Research Foundation to be established with a great deal of funding, and internationalization of education. If you remember, during the UPI government, there was a proposal to open up our education sector to foreign players, particularly the excellent institutions, the Ivy League institutions, and the globally highly ranked institutions. But it was opposed by the powers that be, and it did not really happen. But at the moment in the new policy, internationalization is favorably looked at, and foreign institutions will be invited to set up campuses here. Integration of vocational, teacher, and professional education. We'll see some details little later on. Then standalone I'm skipping the new quality HEIs being made easier. That's a minor change. Standalone HEIs and professional education institutions will evolve into multidisciplinary institutions. This word multidisciplinary is not understood properly by many people, including those who are now taking part in the implementation of this policy. Just last week, we had a conference here by a group called the Education Promotion Society for India. You might have heard about it. And there, the director of a national institute had some wrong ideas about what multidisciplinary institutions. I'll give that example a little later on. Then National Institute for Pali, Persian, and Prakrit, National Educational Technology Forum. It's an excellent idea. And MHRD to be renamed as Ministry of Education, which has already been done. There are some basic principles of this policy. This is a long presentation. I would like to leave some time for discussion. Therefore, some of these things I will skip, except for looking at the words and sentences which I have given in red. They define the purpose of an educational system. It is a very good definition. It's a long definition. I believe that if you want to get the full benefit of this talk, you need to go back home and look at the presentation. I'll make it available to you. The original document is very long, but I have tried to, in higher education, I have tried to compress them into some small sentences, small paragraphs, and so on. You may wish to take a look at it. What is the purpose of the education system? It is given there. Very good. It's a motherhood statement, as it's called. It's a very good statement indeed. And what kind of citizens is it going to build? Because students ultimately become citizens with greater responsibility and accountability. And this is as envisaged by our Constitution. Ultimately, whatever we do in whatever sector, it has to be sanctioned by the Constitution. It is according to the constitutional statements. So it is an excellent set of principles. They also define a very good educational institution. If you look at these 4 points, you realize that they are indeed very good statements. So your institution, for example, and the institutions of all the participants, you're all expected to include the 4 conditions which have been indicated here. For example, in which every student feels welcomed and cared for, obviously. Or who is the most important stakeholder in education? Even the courts have said that it is the student. The student is the most important stakeholder. The other stakeholders are faculty members, institutions, industry, which receives these graduates, and so on. So the 4 points indicated here are supposed to be the crux of the goal of every educational institution. And they talk about seamless integration and coordination between the different sectors. And they also look at the fundamental principles which will guide both the education system at large as well as the individual institutions like yours. So there are some points here. Again, I won't go into the details. The highest priority is to be given in primary education to foundational literacy and numeracy by all students. Many studies have shown that even after grade 3 or grade 5, the children are not able to count, they are not able to read and understand, comprehend, and so on. So this is the result of bad institutions, the lack of teachers, lack of good teachers, and so on. So these are expected to be prerequisites or requisites for an educational institution. Then these words are bandied about in the policy. I'm not sure that everybody understands what these things are. Multidisciplinarity and holistic education. So we can have a discussion on that. And then rather than rote learning, which is memorizing and passing examinations, that should not be the norm. The norm should be conceptual understanding. Again, how we are going to do it is a big challenge. Creativity and critical thinking, ethics and human and constitutional values, which are the result of experiences of many countries and also many policies in the different countries. Ethics, professional values, constitutional values, and human values. Multilingualism, as I pointed out, we have 22 official languages and the power of language in teaching and learning. So towards this, what they say is that education, including higher education, including professional education, to be taught in the local language. Karnataka has taken the lead. There are about, I don't know, a couple or more institutions which have offered to come and provide the education, technical education in the local language, namely Kannada. And I believe a couple of these programs have already started. So there are some challenges. We can discuss that. life skills. What are life skills? Communication, cooperation, teamwork, and resilience to be promoted in each of the students. And another important recommendation is the summative assessment. That means assessment at the end of a year through a 3-hour examination in each subject. That will be replaced by what we have in higher education mostly, that means in semester system and periodical tests and so on. That is formative assessment. As you learn through the semester, you're also assessed, and the grade card includes the assessment in each of these subjects in each of the semester examinations. Extensive use of technology in teaching and learning. We have been talking about technology-enhanced learning. Now, this has become a reality, particularly in the post-pandemic era. So that is going to be the norm. This is the expectation. Hybrid learning, where different sets of students, they learn both offline and online, that will be the norm in the near future. And Divyang students are students with disabilities, and their special needs will be looked at. Respect for diversity and local context. Now, education is a concurrent subject, I pointed out, meaning that both the state government and the central government have equal accountability and a responsibility for providing resources, for example. That is a very difficult, complex concept to implement. For example, there's a 3-language formula, which is coming to existence because of the center's responsibility for education, higher education. Whereas one of the state governments, Tamil Nadu government, for example, they would not have a 3-language formula. They would like to have it only in the local language and English. There was an agitation, anti-Hindi agitation, which resulted in the successful formation of the ruling party at the moment. So it's a very serious issue indeed. Synergy in curriculum, and they recognize teachers and faculty as the heart of the learning process. The most important stakeholder in the educational system is the student, and the next most important are the teachers and the faculty. If changes have to take place as a result of the proposals of the education policy, who will be the change agents? You and I, teachers, we have to implement the recommendations of the policy. Then they talk about a light but tight regulatory framework. I haven't heard anybody give a succinct definition of this light but tight. Everybody talks about it. But I believe in my interpretation, it means there will not be too many regulations, but whatever regulations exist, they will be very strictly followed and implemented. That, I believe, is the meaning of this light but tight. In the policy document, it occurs more than once. And then they look at the importance of autonomy, good governance, and empowerment, and outstanding research. If you look at the global rankings, these rankings come up every year, the Times Higher Education rankings, the Quacquarelli-Simons QS rankings, then there is the Shanghai rankings. In each one of them, research output, research performance is one of the most important criteria for ranking these global universities, including our own NIRF, National Institutional Ranking Framework. Research performance is extremely important. The number of papers and the citations that these papers have received. It is a very important thing. I'm sure you're also being assessed by the NIRF, and that this is a very important criterion. And etc. A few more of these points. Now we are in the sector of higher education, so I'll focus on what has been said about higher education. They talk about the outcome being quality universities and colleges, and they also talk about a new and forward-looking vision for India's higher education system, because the past is useless anymore. We are moving into the future. In the future, what are our aspirations? What is our performance? So again, higher education, you realize, is important in a different sense from primary education and secondary education. It actually converts a student into an employable graduate. So what are the characteristics of these graduate attributes? And then within the framework of what is envisioned in our constitution, democratic, just, socially conscious, they're all political terms, and very important, of course. And we are becoming a knowledge economy in society. As I pointed out earlier, we used to say knowledge superpower. And many committees, including the National Knowledge Commission, have been talking about knowledge superpower. But now we have come to our senses and we say it is a knowledge economy and society. Now, 21st century requirements are very different from the requirements of the past because so many changes are taking place both in the ecosystem of higher education, the ecosystem of employability and employment, ultimately leading to economic development, social development. So the requirement is ultimately to develop good, thoughtful, well-rounded, and creative individuals. You can discuss each one of them in a great deal of depth, but however, they are good motherhood statements. Again, you expect to develop character, ethical and constitutional values, etc., the whole lot of terms which are used there. Each one of them is important in some sense or the other, and they are all listed in this policy. And let me go to the second paragraph. Ask yourself the question, what is the purpose of higher education? There has been a lot of discussion in the literature, including in international arenas. Is it for individual employment, which means private good? It is good for you without looking at the society or the nation. Or is it good for the nation, to make the nation prosperous, progressive, etc.? That is called public good. Is higher education for private good or public good? If it is for private good, then the government, why should it invest in the individual? So the individual has to pay for the good that he gets after education. If it is public good, then the government must spend its finances in order to achieve the results that need to be achieved. So that's a big difference, and a lot of debate takes place. At the moment, it is largely agreed that higher education is a public good. Through sometimes in private good, but ultimately public good is also being achieved. The policy document is very good in the sense it looks at the major problems currently faced by the higher education system in India. Again, I won't go into the details. I'm sure in your institutions, in your host institution here, all of you have experienced these problems. Therefore, you have to remove these problems in order for success to be achieved. And they also look at several other factors. And one focal point is governance and leadership of higher education institutions. In the TechWhip, we had the experience. The first set of objectives was to enhance the quality and performance of undergraduate education. And secondly, to enhance the employability of these graduates. Then postgraduate education and research. When all these things are achieved, even then, the higher education institutions did not achieve excellence, did not achieve quality, and did not fulfill the objectives of higher education. Why? Because it was recognized it was a governance and leadership. The leader of an institution, like, for example, the director of your institution, has a great deal of responsibility. The entire institution follows in the footsteps of the leader of the institution. If the leader wants something to be done, pronounces the policy, and everybody follows the leader. Now, because of ineffective leadership and governance, many people do not understand what governance is. Governance is what your board of governors does, what its responsibilities are. What are its responsibilities? There is a green book, as it is called, which we brought out under TechWhip. It is the governance guide for higher education institutions. For example, particularly academic leaders, ask yourself the question, what are the duties and responsibilities of the board of governors? We have a meeting every 3 months. So what are the responsibilities? The selection of the members of the board, which is an important consideration. So you understand what I'm trying to say. So if these processes are effective, then the institution is definitely on an upward trajectory. Merit-based career management, I'm glad that they bring it out in the document, and a few other things about governance and leadership. So we now function in a set of circumstances, an ecosystem, and if you want to improve, we have to make key changes to the current system, transformations to the current system. Every day, we are faced with many challenges, we are faced with many problems. If you want to solve these problems, we make some changes. And these are lessons for more changes to be made. One important aspect of change management is that the stakeholders who have to implement the changes, faculty members here, for instance, they have to appreciate why these changes are being suggested, why benefits are expected to accrue from these changes. If I'm not convinced that I have to change, but I don't see the result of this change, I will not give full commitment to making these changes. Now, here comes again the multidisciplinarity that they talk about. I'll give an example a little while later about what really this means. So the entire set of institutions, they would like to move to a more multidisciplinary undergraduate education. If there is discussion, I'll discuss that. And then moving towards faculty and institutional autonomy. Ultimately, student is the most important stakeholder. You have to enhance the student experiences. Now, after teaching, the next aspect, which is important, both nationally and globally, is research. And therefore, they talk about the establishment of a national research foundation. Excellent suggestion. And if you want to conduct research, you need funds, you need funding. And this NRF is expected to coordinate the different sources of funds to fund outstanding peer-reviewed research. Now, look at it, light but tight regulation. They are suggesting the formation of a single regulator for higher education. I will look at the details of this. Who are our regulators for higher education at the moment? UGC, AICTE, National Teacher Education Regulator, and the regulators in every other sector of education. So we'll look at this structure a little later on. They also define the primary activities of the National Research Foundation. You see a lot of suggestions which have been made, which mirror the existence of such units, particularly in the United States and in the West. What is the reason for this? One of the principal advisors for this NEP was Professor Manjul Bhargava. Remember that name? Manjul Bhargava is a Fields Medal winner. Fields Medal is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in mathematics. There is no Nobel Prize in mathematics, but instead of that, they have this Fields Medal, and he is a Fields Medal winner, which basically means he's a performer, a superior performer in the area of mathematics. He's a professor of mathematics in Princeton. He used to come to India very often in order to advise the National Education Policy Committee. So he has brought in a lot of ideas from the US into our system. So NRF is similar to what exists in the US. It is a National Science Foundation, which has initiated a number of policy changes, a number of initiatives which have resulted in the enhancement of the importance of research. Therefore, it's a very good set of recommendations. So that is the basis, I believe, for the formation of the National Research Foundation in India. Now, here are the details of how they are suggesting that the regulatory system of higher education in India should be transformed. Please give some attention, because this is going to be a complete change from what exists today. They make some statements like regulation of higher education has been too heavy-handed. I have stressed the word too heavy-handed. I don't really know what it means. And too much has been attempted to be regulated with too little effect. I, again, don't understand what it means. So, I mean, I'm stating what is given here, and I don't understand what they say. Many other people do. So, heavy concentrations of power within a few bodies, again, is state, because I've been the chairman of AICTE, which is the regulatory body for technical education. And you know, the technical education in India covers a wide range of disciplines. It covers engineering education, management education, architecture, pharmacy, and a whole lot of things. According to the definition of the AICTE Act, it's not universally correct. So my friends in the West, they have a hard problem understanding why technical education and engineering education are not similar, why you add up management and other things. Anyway, it is because of the definition in the Act. So they talk about heavy concentrations of power within a few bodies. So they expect a complete overhaul of the regulatory system. There are essentially 4 functions of regulation, something connected with regulation. Regulation, accreditation, funding, and academic standard setting. So for these 4 functions, they have 4 verticals, as they call them. Ultimately, these 4 independent verticals will be within an umbrella institution. They are centralized into the Higher Education Commission of India, HECI. This is a new acronym that you have to come to terms with. Not UGC or AICTE, it is the Higher Education Commission of India, which will be the overall umbrella organization. It will be 4 verticals. The first vertical is the National Higher Education Regulatory Council, another acronym, NHERC, National Higher Education Regulatory Council. So excluding medical and legal education, it will cover all the other sectors of higher education, technical education, teacher education, science education, and so on. Then NHERC will be set up to regulate in a light but tight and facilitative manner. Again, the light but tight. And again, I've given the description of what it will cover. So the first vertical is National Higher Education Regulatory Council. The second vertical is a meta-accrediting body. At the moment, we have NAAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council. Then we have NBA, National Board of Accreditation. All of them will be merged to form a meta-accrediting body called NAC, not NAAC, but NAC, National Accreditation Council. So it will cover all aspects of higher education. So it would require institutional development plans to be made. Now, IDPs, if you have been at equip institution, you know that you are expected to make these institutional development plans. What does it mean? It means you set for yourself your own goals in 10 to 15 years, or 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. What would you like your institution to be known as? What would you like to achieve as your goals? That is the institutional development plan. Now, they would want all the higher education institutions to develop this and to attain the highest level of accreditation. What does that mean, highest level of accreditation? In the past, as you know, we had 3 levels of accreditation in NBA, A, B, and C, A being the highest. Next, they made it 5-year accreditation for 5 years and accreditation for 3 years. Whereas international practice demands that it's either yes or no. That is the binary process, they call it. So we will also transform ourselves into a binary system of accreditation. Either you're accredited or you're not. The third vertical will be the expansion of the UGC, Higher Education Grants Council, which will be in charge of funding and financing of higher education based on norms, transparent criteria, and so on. So there is the third vertical. And the fourth vertical is the overall apex body, the General Education Council, which will look at the learning outcomes, which are also called graduate attributes. At the moment, we have an excellent organization, a framework, National Skills Qualifications Framework. It is based on what exists in ASEAN countries. Malaysia, for instance, and so on. And Western countries like Australia and the UK also have them. And industry has a great deal of inputs to give. NASSCOM, for instance, has a considerable amount of expertise, which is given to this qualifications framework. So this is a national skills qualifications framework. So correspondingly, there will be a national higher education qualification framework, acronym is there. So together, they will look at higher education and vocational education and the integration of one into the other. If it happens, it will be an excellent step in order to promote employability of both in skills as well as in higher education. So these are some of the important recommendations. They also talk about preparing our students into well-rounded learners with 21st century skills. What are 21st century skills? Some indication is given in the policy, but there are many international organizations, the World Economic Forum, for instance. Go on Google and try to find out what has the World Economic Forum said about the 21st century skills. They look at speculation a little bit, but what will be the nature of technology sectors in the future? And in order to make these sectors functional, what kind of graduates do we have to produce? At the moment, as you know, we have a number of professional councils. There is the Council of Architecture, there is the National Council for Vocational Education and Training, there is the Council of Pharmacy Council of India, Council for Agricultural Research, and so on. These are important organizations because they represent the professions. At the moment, some of them have regulatory roles also. For example, COA, Architecture and Pharmacy, they have a strong voice in defining the curricula and defining the standards and so on. So the policy says that they will be included and involved in overall policy making, but they will not have any regulatory role. The regulatory role will only be vested with the government organizations. I do not know how the councils will take this recommendation because at the moment they have a lot of power, as you know. Then HECI itself will be an independent body consisting of experts. Like the Election Commission of India, they are looking at this as a body with large amount of powers, but also consisting of very responsible people. So, and another very important idea is that education, higher education, is a non-profit activity in India. You cannot make any profit out of education. If there is an excess of revenue over expenditure, it is stated as such, and it is to be used for institutional development. So if any money has to come in, it has to come in through philanthropy. So public philanthropic partnership is also promoted. And this is a very important recommendation. This is expected to exist at the moment, but it's not in practice. Originally, about 25 years ago, there used to be what is called the capitation fee, and it was officially abolished. And what it is in practice is a different matter altogether. But education in India is a not-for-profit activity, not-for-profit enterprise. This is stressed here by saying that this will be investigated, examined, both at the regulatory stage as well as at the accreditation stage, and it will be curbed, it will be prevented. Governance and leadership, we have talked enough. And this is again something which is a very important recommendation of this policy. We are in professional education. So defines what the professionals must subscribe to. Ethics, for instance, public purpose. If you build a dam or a bridge, must make sure that the right material and the right quantities are utilized. There is no corruption in using lower quality materials. It has been the bane of our country, for instance. It is equivalent to corruption. So this is another set of recommendations. Now we come to a very important recommendation. Standalone agricultural universities, legal universities, health science university, technical universities. We have technical universities in every state at the moment. and again, a lot of discussion has taken place. The proposal is not to allow them anymore. No standalone institutions, they must all evolve into multidisciplinary institutions. Again, people are confused. I mean, I have seen even mature administrators talking about things in a very irresponsible fashion. Yeah, I'll come to the example. Now, if you look at your own institutions, you have engineering, you have management, you have, in order to support the engineering programs, you have humanities and social sciences, basic sciences. So are you not a multidisciplinary institution? Ask yourself that question, and if there's any discussion, then go ahead and have some seminars and webinars and things like that. So this is something. IITs, I want them to be converted into central universities and multidisciplinary institutions. And I have my own comments about it. Technical education at the moment, we have degree programs, we have diploma programs, we have certificate programs. In multiple entry and multiple exit, they expect that graduates will be able to go out of the institution with a certificate, diploma, or a degree or a postgraduate degree. And so this is the structure that is being recommended. And here at the last paragraph, there is a set of activities, a set of subjects that they consider to be 21st century specializations. Some of them already exist. Some of them will evolve into newer ones. For example, your own workshop you have had on AI and ML, these are evolving disciplines. And AICTE, for example, has given permission for you to start new BTech programs in these areas, recognizing that these are emerging areas 21st century. Now, technology involvement in education, technology enhanced education. They also talking about National Educational Technology Forum. I'm sure in your institution at the moment, you are using a lot of technology, both digital technology as well as educational technology in replacing face-to-face education that we could not have because of the pandemic. So this includes learning, assessment, planning, administration, all these areas. In all of them, we are now using technology, digital technology. NETF, they've defined the functions of NETF. Now, online and digital education, this has become necessary for us in this season of pandemics and endemics. So we have succeeded in learning and employing this technology to engage the students. But what is not available to all students is equity. That is a digital divide, internet availability, particularly in the rural areas, it is not available. So they have suggested the use of satellites, which we have, we pioneered the use of satellites in education through that program SITE, Satellite Instructional Television Experiment. It was a success. Therefore, the use of satellite where internet connectivity is not available. So they talk about digital divide. Again, this is material that I'm giving to you from the policy document, but I will not discuss them too much. Now, pilot studies for online education requires to be done because you have to learn from experience, and what succeeds, make use of, what does not succeed, you have to replace them with much better technologies. So they expect the higher educational institutions plus IGNU and NETF and all these things to actually conduct pilot studies and a series of pilot studies in parallel, learn from each other so that ultimately you produce successful graduate attributes. And digital infrastructure, a great deal of progress has taken place in this. For example, your use of TVs and over-the-top technologies and your e-commerce, for instance. All of us were forced to employ digital buying from major firms. So e-commerce, we have learned particularly when the government came up with some monetary policies. Online teaching platform and tools, a lot of work has been done. A number of platforms exist. SWAYAM is one such. All of you are aware of this. NPTEL is a part of SWAYAM. SWAYAM is a Hindi acronym for Study Webs of Active Learning for Young Aspiring Minds. But then it is a set of platforms and MOOCs, massive open online courses. Diksha similarly is a teacher-friendly set of platforms. So all these things will be strengthened. That is the basic idea. Then they also look at gaming as a means of learning, gamification, and fun-based learning it is called. Although other people object, learning is never fun. It is a discipline one has to learn. And whether we can replace it by games and so on, some orthodox people, they have difficulties with it. Digital divide, it exists, and therefore, how can it be removed? So first, the one way of doing it is to enhance the digital infrastructure throughout, whether it is the rural area or the urban area, and then also replace it with satellite-based media. Virtual labs. One of the objections to online learning is, how do you teach experiments and how do you replace the labs? But virtual labs, there's an attempt to replace the actual labs by the experiments by virtual lab. And Swayam Prabha is a platform of MHRD where they're expecting to fulfill this requirement. Then training and incentives for teachers. Teachers being recognized as the principal agent of change for making this policy succeed, then you have to provide so many facilities for teachers, so much of training for teachers. Assessment is an important part of education. And for this, they have designed a system, PARAC, Performance, Assessment, Review, and Analysis for Holistic Development. And blended models of learning. There's a difference between blended and hybrid. So hybrid is expected to become the norm in the post-pandemic scenario. Take a look at it in Google and find out the difference between blended and hybrid modes of learning. Then a dedicated unit for building a world-class digital infrastructure. So this is technology-based thing. These are proposals. In the next section, I'm going to look at some implementation strategies and implementation, what we have been able to achieve, what is required to make it happen. One of the things is they are strengthening the Central Advisory Board of Education. This is being undertaken. This is in progress. Financing, affordable and quality education for all students, all stakeholders. Difficult aim to fulfill. And implementation, there are some details. We'll take a look at them. Before that, let us look at what our Prime Minister has been saying and what his concepts are regarding the NEP. When he released the NEP document, he made several statements, very important statements. As you know, he's a wordsmith. He concocts or he invents words, he invents phrases, and he invents the scale and speed. I mean, one of the first things that he said, see, in a country, if you want progress, if we are large countries, therefore large-scale changes have to take place. But world is evolving fast. Therefore, we have to do it quickly. So he said scale and speed. So he looks at the difference from old education policy and the new one when he released this document. He said the NEP till now, the earlier policies, they were talking about what to think. But this policy, he points out, he indicates that it shows us how to think. It's an important difference. And research and technology focused, quality education for all. And he remembered APJ Abdul Kalam, whose objective of high quality education is providing education to make quality human beings. He focused on the soft side of the policy, how every human being in our country can be made to be a quality human being with individual characteristics. Then teacher training, he gave importance. When a teacher learns, he said, the nation leads. And he urged the institutes of national importance and the high higher education institutions to lead the whole project, the mission, and to help the other people, less endowed and less developed institutions, to become equal to them. This is happening in our country. Margadharshaks is a set of institutions of this type. Classes in mother tongue, it's a very sensitive issue. Multiple exit option. Okay, that is Modi, Prime Minister Modi. Next, let us look at the ideas and concepts of Dr. Kasturi Rangan, who was the chairman of this drafting committee. So there were a couple of very clever or very intelligent magazines which drew out Dr. Kasturi Rangan and tried to find out why certain things were done. It will also help us to understand why certain things are being done. So he said that we need to have a flexible education system. And what are the main objectives of the revamp after 34 years? Obviously, many things have changed around us. Many things have changed in our own country. Therefore, we need to create a dynamic education system. That is why these changes. Then we need to have an open-minded approach to education, he has been saying. So they said, please explain to us what it means, what an open-minded approach to education. He points out that a chartered accountant, for example, just cannot study finance. He has to study many other things. He has to study, for example, politics. He has to study history and so on. There needs to be diversity. So he says that our policy is integrated yet flexible. The important words they use about this new policy is that it is flexible. It provides for various options for the different types of students that we have. A major recommendation in the policy is to allow foreign universities to set up campuses in India. It's a U-turn from what the UPA policies were. So they asked the question, will the powerful private college university lobby allow it to be implemented? Will these people, management of these institutions, will they allow foreign universities to be set up? I think it is a wrong question. They will not have any objection to set up foreign university campuses. It was the previous government which had, for good reasons, they did not want the foreign university to set up. So Kasturi Rangan points out that it's not all and sundry. If you look at Russia, for instance, they will allow a foreign institute to set up a campus only if that foreign institution is highly ranked in global rankings. A similar point is made by Dr. Kasturi Rangan. So 3 lakh students, more than that, maybe even more just now, go abroad every year from India. So if the decision to make the degree 4 years aimed at making this easier, many of you will remember that in Delhi University, when the Vice Chancellor, he converted the 3-year program into a 4-year program, there was such a lot of opposition to it and confusion and so on. So the same thing is not being proposed by NEP. So he points out, no, it's not so, not to enable our students to go abroad. It is to make them more job worthy and so on. I'm not sure if he himself is convinced about this reason. Then he points out something which I find it very curious. So we have recommended major and minor subjects like physics with music. Which one of you would want to study physics and music? I would like to really know. Why this has come into the picture? Because of Manjul Bhargava. Because in the US, it is possible to do that. Therefore, we must also provide that flexibility here. Whether it is pragmatic or not, you decide. Next question is an interesting question. The number of seats in premier institutions like the IITs, national law schools, IIMs, and so on, they're too few for an aspirational country like India. Do you believe that more seats might dilute quality? It is a debatable point, and I have some experience of this myself. The number of IITs and the IIMs have been, NITs, they have been increased multifold during the past decade, for instance. So initially, many of us had doubts, the same doubt, whether it would dilute quality, because you will not have the proper infrastructure for the first year at least, you will not have the right type of faculty members and so on. I was a member of a committee to look at some newly established IITs. And let me tell you, after about 5 years, let me tell you that I was most impressed because they followed strict guidelines. They recruited people only with a PhD, only people with PhD. They also got a lot of money to create new infrastructure. Many of them were also given land and money to create new campuses. Patna, for instance, they have created many institutions. Hyderabad has created a new campus and so on. They had committed leaders, directors, and so on. As a result, within 5 years, we could see that their performance had improved tremendously. And in fact, some of them overtook the older IITs in terms of rankings. So it does not mean when you create new institutions that it will dilute quality. There is an international expert who studies what happens in India in education in general and higher education. He wrote an article saying that opening up new institutions will ruin the system of higher education in India. I believe he is completely wrong. And the use of mother tongue as the medium of instruction, as I pointed out, it is a very sensitive issue. And one state in particular has spoken out against the three-language formula. Teachers are very important, and how are you going to produce the necessary teachers with competence? So the answer from Natarajan is the teachers can no more be trained in the grand old teachers training institutes. We have both in general education as well as in technical education. So his idea is that the teacher training institutions should become a part of the overall university system. Every university will have a department of teacher training or training of training so that it will be a part of the overall system. I believe it's a very good idea. So we'll skip the rote learning part of it. And how do we get our colleges and universities to do world-class research, which will eventually be of benefit to society? He makes a very radical statement. He says that present research in our universities is highly unsatisfactory. I must say it is dismal, which in fact is true. If you look at the output of our university system in terms of research, on the output of the national labs, the defense labs, the DST labs, and so on, they produce much better research than our universities. One of the reasons might be that they do not have any other responsibility but research, whereas universities have both teaching and research as their important responsibilities. Let me make a few comments before I proceed further. See, what does an education policy do? What is it all about? It reviews the past and charts out a future looking at the emerging global environment and the national aspirations. Unfortunately, this policy has made the same mistake that other policies have made. They have not looked at the past. There is a lot of wisdom in the past documents and reports. For example, the review committees of IITs and IIMs, they study the existing system and they give recommendations on how they should move into the future. Why haven't those reports been consulted when dealing with the overall system? They are the best institutions in our country. I'll also point out that these policy documents serve a very important purpose. The 1986 policy, for example, for the first time combined technical and management education. It created the AICTE in 1987 and the accreditation systems, both NBA as well as NAC in 1994. Without these policy recommendations, those policy recommendations, it would not have happened. Accreditation systems would not have been created. Therefore, they have a very important role to play.
Sir, can we?
Yes.
Sir, actually, the session is scheduled to be finished by 4:30. If you could answer some questions, it would be very
sure. I wasn't told. I was told it between 3 and 5. Sure.
Sir, some few questions are also there from the participants.
Absolutely. Let me start with a proper.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Proper thing. 1 second. So I'll point out the 10
you can take 5 minutes to conclude, sir.
Yeah, 5 minutes to conclude.
Yeah.
This is the Subramanyan committee recommendations. Take a look at it and why some of these things have not been followed up. a reality check. This is something important to understand. If you want to achieve the objectives of the policy, you will have to, for example, in terms of GER, you must open one new university every week for the next 15 years. School education, you will have to open 50 schools every week, again, over the next 15 years. Is that a possibility? Therefore, there are many things that we are proposing that will not happen. We know for a fact that it will not happen. So what do we do? I'll leave you with that question mark. Now for questions. Now you can ask questions.
Sir, one question is, sir, is it a myth or reality that NEP-2020 envisions increasing privatization of Indian higher education? Because we have seen some revolts are being going on in that.
No, if you want to achieve GER, you need the efforts and initiatives in the private sector as well as in the public sector, or the public sector as well as in the private sector. So it will not increase the private participation unreasonably, but it is required to increase the GER. What is wrong with, to tell me at the moment, the contribution of private sector to higher education is about 80%, right? The government does not have the resources to, give higher education to all and sundry. It is not possible. So you have to bring in partnerships with curbing commercialization, enhancing quality. Look at the school system. And again, ask why all government servants do not send their children to government schools. Why do they send them to private schools? Politicians. Why government servants? That's because it has quality.
And one more question is from Dr. Rekha. She is from Patiala, sir. Why NIRF ranking has huge gap between the best and the rest?
Beg your pardon, NIRF rankings?
Has a huge gap between the best and the rest.
Meaning what?
So the best institutional ranking is very high as compared to the rest of the institutes.
Isn't that what you expect? The good institutions will be ranked high, and the not so good, I won't call them bad, the not so good institutions will not be ranked high. You see,
excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
I want to ask why some substandard universities rank high than high standard universities. Like PEC is ranked, PEC Chandigarh is ranked below Chandigarh University in Kadua. So PEC is very old, prestigious institute, and CU is a new institute, private institute having substandard faculty. Why it is ranked highly in Nirf, whereas PEC is ranked below CU?
What do you mean by a substandard university?
Substandard
Your
means
perception. Yes.
Substandard means they don't have highly qualified faculty like PEC, but CU is ranked
PEC is
high.
a Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh. She means to say Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh is called PEC. And the other university she is talking about is a state university,
Private
I
university.
think. Yeah, it's a Chandigarh University. It's a state university, which has recently come up. Whether the Punjab Engineering College is very old, I think maybe more than 50 years. So that's
Can I make a few comments? First of all, the age of an institution does not indicate its quality. How is the NIRF ranking decided upon? It is decided upon a number of criteria, and the weightings, if any, given to each of these criteria. It is an independent, objective assessment. So your perception about some institution does not mean it has to be good. Each person has a different perception, but this is an objective evaluation. You must have faith in the national ranking system.
Sir, but faculty is the most important part of ranking, and Chandigarh University does not have even a single, very few PhD faculty members, and
I
PEC
think
has most of the.
You should appeal to the NIRF authority. This is the fact of the matter, and how is it being done? Now you have to question the rankings between your opinion.
So this is the single example I am taking. There are so many other universities which are ranked below some substandard universities.
Let me ask you a question. Who does this rank?
Yes.
Who are the people who actually assess these institutions in terms of the ranking parameters? It is you and I. It is faculty members.
Yes, sir.
Based on objective information provided by the individual institution. So
Yes,
once
sir.
you have faith in the system, you should believe the results of the studies of the different universities.
Okay, okay, sir.
Sir, what is your opinion on this affiliation system being discontinued in the next 15 years? Like, do you see it is in a positive way? Like, what is the reason for this? Like, why they do not need these affiliated institutions?
Well, what is wrong with affiliating systems?
Yes, yes, I want to know.
What does autonomy mean? Autonomy means you are free to make changes in your administrative, academic, and financial areas. And why would you want to make change? Because the existing system is not sufficiently efficient. You would like to replace it by a different system. For example, take curriculum, for instance. In the university system, it is so difficult to change the curriculum because you have so many different diverse opinions from diverse members of the academic council, boards of studies, and things like that. Whereas if you are an autonomous, you take a look at autonomous institutions, every semester they make changes because the world is changing so fast. The industrial ecosystem is changing so fast. You need to change, which is very difficult. The university system has a lot of inertia, and that is the affiliating system.
Sir, but universities can change, and there are some very good universities too. Like if you see the central universities, the old universities, 100-year-old universities, they have a set of standards, and one would like to be associated and affiliated to that university, and the university can change instead of sitting into inertia.
These universities you are talking about, 100-year-old universities, central universities, how difficult it is to make changes. And I can tell you, I have a quote from one of the vice chancellors, and he said every academic council meeting is full of chaos. People don't agree on things. Why were the regional engineering colleges converted into national institutes of technology?
So it is like made mandatory now.
Can
it can be a choice. Every institute can be given a choice whether they want to be affiliated or they want to be autonomous. So why is this
can you please
binding?
repeat that question? Speak a little louder.
Yeah. What I'm telling is that instead of just phasing out and stopping it altogether, this affiliated system, maybe we can continue with the same system depending on the choice of the institute. Maybe they want to be autonomous, or there can be a partial autonomy. And if we want to be affiliated, then what's wrong in that? Suppose we like the university has a very good infrastructure, very good faculty, and very good systems in place, and its syllabus is changing, curricula is changing, governing board is good, and they are taking care of their affiliated institutions. So why not we leave it to the institute itself instead of making it mandatory?
Once you realize that there are so many lacunae in the affiliating system, then it requires to be replaced. You don't want freedom? You want to be controlled by another person?
No, it's not. Yeah, the university change, there can be a partial control and there can be a partial regulation. So why just stop it altogether? That is what I mean to say.
No, it is not logical as far as I'm concerned. And why you would want to be in under the masters of two sets of people, one the university and another one your own institution. But anyway, people who have long experience and also looking at international scenario, for instance, not a single world-class institution is an affiliating institution, an affiliated institution. All of them are autonomous. Once you have this experience, why would you want to get involved in a complex combination of two systems?
Like suppose there are 100 institutions imparting the same type of courses, there has to be some similarity instead of every institute being different. That is what
I will not argue with you, but the universal principle is, if you want quality, if you want transformation, if you want to be a dynamic system, you need to have freedom. And that is not possible in an affiliated system.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Sir, one more question is there.
Yes.
Sir, according to the National Education Policy 2020, students willing to complete their education have to study for 4 years, while one can easily complete his or her diploma degree in 2 years. So don't you feel that this might increase the pupil to leave course midway whenever they are getting the job, not going for the complete higher education?
Now the question is, would you like to leave that institution with a diploma or a degree? Once you realize that the degree is much better than a diploma. For example, take the polytechnic system we have at the moment. Would a student study in a polytechnic and get a diploma at the end of 3 years, or would he join a university and get a degree after 4 years? The answer is obvious.
Yeah, it will depend upon the circumstances of that person, his own personal circumstances, whether he wants to leave the degree, whether he wants to continue and take a degree.
These are general principles, and a degree is a higher qualification than a diploma. Once you realize that, the answer is clear.
Sir, one more last question, I think, if there are no other questions. So how can we define this multidisciplinary, in your opinion, and holistic education in the new education policy?
Holistic, I will not dare to describe, because it is a highly subjective matter. But as far as multidisciplinary is concerned, the difference between discipline and department, that has to be realized. Indeed, every department describes a set of disciplines. Multiple disciplines are involved in a department. Because in mechanical engineering department, civil engineering department, you have inputs from humanities and social sciences, basic sciences, management, and so on. They are the multiple disciplines. So every one of our engineering colleges at the moment is multidisciplinary. And the second thing is the size. Would you like to have an institution of 20,000 capacity or an institution of 2,000 capacity? You know, the problems of governance, the decentralization that has to be managed, the number of transactions that need to be managed. It is true that boundaries between departments and disciplines must be broken. You must have a lot of interdepartmental and interdisciplinary activities, including research and teaching. That also is happening now. Every Bachelor of Engineering degree gets inputs from different departments. So I do not understand what this multidisciplinary. The other day, this director of a national institute was saying all kinds of things. IIT Kharagpur, for example, I have analyzed it, they have 31 departments because they have medicine, they have several other branches. I have a list of these departments. So he said that it is not a multidisciplinary institution.
Okay. Okay, sir.
My major objection to some of the things that NEP 2020 has said is they have not made use of the wisdom that arose from the earlier reports, the earlier studies, not even TSR Subramanyan report, which was 4 years earlier to them. They have suggested an Indian education service, excellent recommendation. So, I mean, you should make use of what other people have done when you propose a set of new things.
Okay, sir. If there are no more questions, sir, any more questions? So thank you so much, sir, for patiently answering to all our questions and queries, and for the wonderful presentation. Very informative, very educative for all the faculty members.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Again, I'll see you tomorrow. Again, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Tomorrow we'll be looking forward to your presence as the chief guest of this program, sir. The FDP ends tomorrow, 7th. Okay, thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.